Thank you for pivoting with us. We had more than 100 of us who RSVP'd. We know the struggles of getting here. Today, we're inviting you to just begin to be engaged. On your tables, you will see the tools for remembering, copying, writing down, getting ready for action. You'll see a phrase, and the phrase is there for you to take in. And if you have another phrase, we have your own banner that you can make and take with you. Empower. We want to remember the lynching. We want to remember disinformation. We want to remember the things that are so important to us. I'm going to do logistics and then turn it over to the person whose vision this is for today. Welcome from the Social Action Commission of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, envisioned by the late Bishop Frederick Calhoun James, and in whose memory we walk to be faithful to the work started with the Free African Society. We believe that James' second chapter, verses 14 through 17, guides us at this moment where we will take our faith into action. Yes, your action matters. Let me do a few logistics for you. While we're together on the table, if you need a pad, a pen, it's there. If you need a mint to freshen yourself, it's there. But what we want most for you to be committed and make committed to do something to make a difference. So together we will do that. You're sitting in round tables so that you can begin to converse with someone. I don't know why you chose the table where you're sitting, but I believe God's in that plan. And there's something about the people sitting at your table you're supposed to continue to work with them on. So take advantage of getting to know who they are. You know, as AMEs, we come to meetings year in, year out. We see each other. But do we take the time to understand what our walks are and why we're in communication with each other? So do that, because together we're going to need each other. You've already started to have your working lunch. I have been advised by my chair and others that we must end at 3:00 because of another meeting. So we're going to take care of all of our business so that that can happen. At each table is a sign-in sheet. Please sign in so that we can continue to be in contact with you as this movement continues over the next several years in this quadrennial. Please give us good information, legible information, your phone number, your email address, and anything else that we need to contact you. That will be critically important. And now I'd just like to share with you, without a long introduction, someone who walks in the spirit of the Free African Society. It is the second time that he has served as chair since I've been serving as director. And I will tell you that he is not only passionate about this work, but he's found a way to combine this with so much of his life. He walks the talk. And so guiding us sometimes more passionate than the law would allow, because he will call out people by name and position when we're not supposed to as a nonprofit organization. And he will give me occasionally the opportunity to clean it up a little bit before it goes out. But sometimes you will get it and it won't be cleaned up. And so you should put it in your secret space and place that other people won't get it. At a time such as this, where we know we need a clear voice, an unashamed voice, a bold voice, speaking for the people, not just African Methodism, for the people of the globe, but especially and unashamedly and unapologetically for the African diaspora. I bring to you the chair of the Social Action Commission, the 132nd elected and consecrated bishop in the line of Richard Allen, Bishop Reginald Jackson.
I don't know who's doing all that stuff that Dr. DuPont says they shouldn't be doing, but we're going to straighten them out today. Let me say hello to everybody, and let me thank you for being here. Now, brothers and sisters, this has been an interesting experience trying to pull all of this together. Today, we had hoped to have Jasmine Crockett. We had hoped to have James Clyburn. We'd hoped to have Terry Sewell, all of them in Congress. But since they are in the minority and they have nothing to do with scheduling, everything got flipped because they're trying to push through what the Orange Man calls the big, beautiful bill. And so they are stuck in Washington. And so it befalls me to say a word to you. My brothers and sisters, our world is absolutely at its worst. I mean, when you stop to think about it, we have really a war between Israel and Iran. We've got war between Russia and Ukraine. We have conflict all over the world. Then you come here to the United States. I have never seen it this way before in all of my life. And I used to be able to say when I was younger, but I want you to know time is filled with swift transition. I find myself now, I don't bend like I used to, don't kick like I used to, whole lot of stuff I don't do no more. But the world continues and the nation continues to decline. My brothers and sisters, our world is just in a mess. And the world at its worst requires the church to be at its best. And the idea for this town hall, when we gathered together, was to really challenge African Methodism to again return to the church at its best. Our brothers and sisters, I don't think we understand how important the Black church is. Nothing for the advancement of Blacks in this country has occurred without the leadership and the input of the Black church. Absolutely nothing. Without the Black church, there would not have been civil rights legislation, open the voting rights bill, equal opportunity. None of that would have occurred without the leadership of the Black church. Without the leadership of the Black church, the NAACP would not have been founded. Without the Black church, there would not be the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Without the Black church, we would not have many of our HBCUs which we have today. The Black church has been absolutely invaluable. And the greatest period of growth in the history of the Black church was during the Civil Rights Movement. During the Civil Rights Movement, you couldn't get a seat in a Black church nowhere. And that's because the Black church was socially engaged. It was leading the fight for civil rights and social justice. But for the last 40 years, in many ways, the Black church and its emphasis shifted. And we became less involved in issues of social justice. We turned more inward than outward. We became caught up in praise at the expense of service. And brothers and sisters, anybody with sense is going to praise God. You praise God for his goodness. But even more than that, anybody with sense is going to worship God. just because of who he is. But over these last 40 or more years, we've really become so caught up in the praise of God that the service of God has been diminished. 99% of all blacks killed by guns are killed by another black. But we can't get involved in that because praise is what we do. Every May and June, thousands, hundreds of thousands of blacks walk across a stage and get a diploma, but they don't have an education. But we can't fight that fight because praise is what we do. In many of our communities, we have a church on every corner. Some blocks we have churches across the street from churches. Some places we got 2 or 3 churches in the same block. But when you walk out the front door of the church, the community is no different. It's no better. But we can't get involved in that because praise is what we do. But my brothers and sisters, there is a praise that turns God off. And that's praise without service. That's praise without faithfulness. Is what God speaks of when he really condemns the temple. You heard me say it before, I'll say it again. There's a passage in the book of Amos which crosses my mind almost every day. It says, I despise the feast days. I have no regard for your solemn assemblies. Though you offer me grain offerings and burnt offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your singing, and the melody of your stringed instruments I will not hear. But let justice run down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. God wants his church to be engaged in kingdom work. Not just church work, but kingdom work. The word church is only mentioned in the Gospels 3 times, but the word kingdom over and over and over. So the fight for social justice is the fight for justice. And so I want to challenge African Methodism to really lead the nation back to the issue of the kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. And really challenge the African Methodist Episcopal Church, because if we are true to our history, the fight for social justice in this country began with the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It began with Richard Allen and a handful of blacks who left St. George's Church, went to a blacksmith shop, and started African Methodism. The first convention for people of color in this country was presided over by Richard Allen, founder of African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so we again have to lead this nation to redeem itself because it has not been faithful to what it claims to be about. General Conference sent me to Washington, sent me to the 2nd District in August of last year. I think it's a great thing they did. I'm indebted to them. Love Washington. And I was going to get a place to live out in the harbor, but my daughter, who thinks she's my second mother, got me a place on Maryland Avenue in Washington. It's a beautiful place, but the fact is that every day when I look out any window in the place, the first thing I see is the Jefferson Memorial. Look at it every single day. And every single day it comes back to me. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I say to myself, didn't mean a word he wrote. Beautiful words, but didn't mean a word that he wrote. And so the speaker of the president of the Georgia Senate asked me before I left, they asked me to come down to the state legislature and get some remarks since I was leaving. I think they were really happy. And they asked me to give some remarks. And afterwards, the Senate president said, Bishop Jackson, why is it the black church is always protesting and marching about stuff? Why? And I said, it's because of you. And he said, me? I said, yeah, and a whole lot of folk just like you. We protest and we march because we're trying to get y'all to live up to what you said. And you haven't done it yet. And now we're living in a time where it is even worse. And our people are like folk in the desert looking for water. And many of them really do not understand what Make America Great Again means. Make America Great Again means to turn back time. Turn back time to a period when there were no civil rights, there were no voting rights, when there was not equal opportunity. Back to a time when blacks and people of color stayed in their place. That's what they want to do. And when you look at this administration's actions, it's very clear. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are bad. But they never say that it's only according to them. They never tell you why diversity is bad. My brother says the fact of the matter is America's greatness is because of its diversity. America's greatness is because of people of all colors who contributed to this nation's history. They need to be reminded the first person to die in the Revolutionary War was a black man by the name of Crispus Attucks. They need to be reminded that every war this nation has fought, at least 25% of the soldiers have been black, while blacks only make up 12% of the population. The United States is the wealthiest nation in the world, but they need to be reminded that up until 1860, they were the second poorest nation in North America. The reason we are the wealthiest nation today is because for more than 100 years, blacks plowed the field, picked the cotton, and never got paid for it. This nation's wealth is built on the fact that blacks, the people who did the labor, never got paid. And so let them try to write American history and not include blacks. Aren't they making it clear that black lives don't matter to them? You take the names off of ships and replace them with those who were in the Confederate Army. Doesn't it make it clear that black lives don't matter? When anything great that a black did, they're dismissing and calling it trying to indoctrinate children against America. Our brothers and sisters, we face a challenging time, and we've got to do more than talk about it. We've got to act about it. Our coming together today is to help us begin to act on it. Not just talk about it, but to act on it. Now, brothers and sisters, I firmly believe that the black church in this country had the opportunity to help America redeem itself. And it needs to be redeemed. In order to do that, we've got to act. Faith without works is dead. And so that's what we are about today. And going forward, you will be hearing a whole lot from the Social Action Commission in terms of what we are seeking to do to help America save itself. what we're trying to do to help us do that which is pleasing in God's sight. Righteousness does exalt a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So there are some things we have got to do. And we have some speakers and some panelists here today who are going to help us as we seek to forge ahead. And I think I was in Texas last year and preached a sermon, The Crisis of Conflicting Voices. Our country is divided because of conflicting voices. And the tragedy is that the white evangelical, quote unquote, Christians have been identified as the spokespersons for the faith community in this country. My brother and sister, you can call yourself anything you want. But the fact of the matter is, Jesus says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. These white evangelical Christians have opposed anything that purports equality and freedom and justice. And so the black church cannot afford to sit idly by and be quiet while they seek to speak to the nation and to shape the mindset of the nation. So the black church must raise its voice. We've got to be like Micaiah in the Old Testament. And the king Jehoshaphat asked Ahab, are there any prophets of God here? And Ahab said, yeah, there's one, but I hate him. I hate him because he's against everything I do. And my brothers and my sisters, that's the mindset we have to give to the orange man in the White House. We want him to hate us because we seek to speak truth to power, because we seek to promote God's kingdom on earth. And, you know, I realize I'm a little slow. You know, there's some folk in here who graduated summa cum laude, magna cum laude. Me, I just graduated, thank you, Lord. And so some things I'm slow at understanding. This whole thing about immigration. The whole thing about immigration is absolutely fraudulent. The orange man does not want to get rid or deport all of the immigrants because they're crooks and rapists. That's what he says. They're felons. They're rapists. And I'm slow. I don't understand why he's upset. He's a felon and a rapist. You figure he would be right at home. But that's not their problem with immigrants of color. You notice you don't hear anything about reform at the northern border. All you hear is dealing with the immigrants at the southern border. But the challenge is that by 2040, the projection is that the majority population of this country will no longer be white. And so this matter of immigration is doing everything they can do to stop the shifting of the population of this country. And we cannot simply afford to sit by and do nothing. He just recently issued an executive order, and he loves executive orders, which really violate the law, but the Congress doesn't enforce the law, so he gets away with it. But now he has an executive order which bans some folk from coming into the country. And isn't it amazing that most of the countries on the list that he proposes to ban from coming to the United States are African countries? Those African countries haven't done anything against the U.S., but they're not banning Russians, they're not banning Chinese, just people of color. And so the black church needs to speak truth to power. And my brothers and my sisters, it's important because of the fact that the Congress has abdicated its authority. the black church must call Congress to task. My brother says it's frustrating because we are not sure which way the judiciary is going to go. And all this effort to intimidate the judiciary. Now the president nominated 3 of those justices up there, and now he's mad with all of them because they don't automatically do what he said they ought to do. Well, we ought to remind him that justice is supposed to be blind. Justice is supposed to be equal. Too many times, judges have been able to see through that scarf around their eyes. And so it's going to take the black church to help save this country from itself. So that's what we want to talk about some today. Again, I hope that you will take leadership in your Episcopal districts, in your annual conferences, on your presiding elder districts, and especially in your local churches. I hope you will take leadership to help stand up and speak truth to power and act in God's name. Hope you'll have some backbone. I hope we will promote God's kingdom. I want to thank Jackie DuPont Walker, who has been our executive director for a number of years and just doesn't get tired. I want to thank all of you who have helped us in the past. Now, I want y'all to help me too. I'm tell you, I need y'all's help. I proposed to the Council of Bishops that we have this social action forum town hall on Monday before the general board, and the council approved it. And next thing I know, there was a council meeting at 9 o'clock this morning, and I want y'all to know I'm nervous. You know, I get nervous when the bishops are meeting and I ain't there. I remember 1972, Bishop Green went to sleep. He was the host bishop for the general conference. He went to sleep. Woke up in the morning and found out he'd been retired. So I wonder what they're doing in that room right now. Y'all pray for me. But let me turn this back over to Jackie DuPont Walker. My brothers and sisters, the black church has got to stand up and be the church at its best. I hope you will help us to do that.
Well, Bishop, you don't have to worry if there's anything that we need to take action on. Are we ready? Okay. Our theme is, as Bishop has stated, when the world is at its worst, the church must be at its best. And that's what our preparation is for today. Our first panel is about the striking back of the righteous. And someone said striking back sounded too militant, but I choose to remember Jesus and the money changers. And there's so many other examples when he said, when things are not as they should be, you must stand in my name. But what we found, and I hope you will find some comfort in, is that the AME Church is already in its far and remote places and around the globe in the 41 countries where we minister and serve, already striking back. And sometimes we don't know. And we wanted a few examples to be shared with you today where the strike back is taking place. And to set it in context with what is going on with Project 2025, we know that someone said, well, that's just the U.S. It is not. The U.S. action has had impact on every single section of the globe. And so on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, in South and Central America, the actions that we've taken have led to increased hunger. It's led to poorer health care. It's led to children not being educated. It's led to older people being pushed to their death sooner. we know that the action we must take here to make sure that this government does what it's supposed to do impacts the entire globe. And so let me just introduce in one standing the persons on the panel, and then our tech team will bring them in as they are either in person or virtual. And to our virtual audience, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your being with us. And we ask you to put in chat any comments that you have. Our presenters today want to tell you what they're doing and then to engage with you. So there's something that triggers a thought, a commitment that you want to make public here today about what you're going to do with what you've heard. When we get to that Q&A period, we want you to just stand up and do it. And then you will be on our prayer list, that God will move with you and what God is leading you to do from this place. Because we came today to stand in our mustard seed faith and to be ready for that action. And so we want to start with Reverend Dr. Roderick Beelan, who is going to take a moment to remind us that taking care of ourselves first is extremely important before we can go and do the other work. And then Mr. Kareem Creighton from the Brennan Center, one of our think tanks for the African American community, will be with us virtually, followed by Reverend Mariana White Hammond, who actually founded a church based upon the principles of stewardship and greening and how we can be better stewards of God's earth. Followed by Dr. Julianne Malveaux, an author and economist, who's going to speak to us about reparation and what is happening there as it relates to a movement. And then Mr. James Gaiman, who is an activist in the 6th District. I did some work with Bishop Jackson around the election, and Stacey Abrams' outstanding work, followed by now an effort in the 6th District, because once they got organized, they are continuing under Bishop Mitchell to do more and more things that are important to the stewardship of the church and the stewardship of the earth in communities that will make a difference. So could we start, tech team, with Reverend Beelan, and then we will move with the others in the order that you select for us. They will take 3 to 5 minutes for their presentation, and then we will engage. So use those notepads to take your notes, your questions, your challenges, because this is truly a dialogue. Dr. Beelan.
Thank you, Sister Jackie DuPont Walker, and I want to say greetings to Bishop Reginald T. Jackson and to all of you, my brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus the Lord. It is a fact, as Bishop Jackson has already said, we're living in unprecedented times. Unprecedented times have required of us even learning new vocabulary. Call your attention to Ezra Klein, an opinion writer in the New York Times, who shared with us a word, muzzle velocity. Muzzle velocity is a word that had been used by Steve Bannon. Y'all know that name. And they use it in the context of, well, you've seen it. You've seen muzzle velocity in the executive actions that have come from President Trump and all of the actions that have taken place through DOGE. It is to hit the public with so many actions that we don't have a chance to focus on one thing before something else happens. It's to disorient, it's to traumatize, it's to terrorize. It's called muzzle velocity. Then there's another word that I learned from Margaret Rankle, who's also an editorial writer for the New York Times. It's called brickbats. It's a term, brickbats, B-R-I-C-K-B-A-T-S, brickbats. Is a term used when folk have been so abused, maligned, talked about, assaulted, that they are fearful of opening their mouths for justice. That's what we're living through right now. We're living through muzzle velocity, and we're being assaulted by brickbats. But the AME Church was built for this time. The AME Church was built for struggle. Our ancestors knew that liberation requires more than conviction. What we need is the infrastructure, the system, the methods of African Methodism that have sustained people through long seasons of uncertainty and change. Today, many in our congregations, the people that we serve, are carrying burdens that they cannot even name. They have grief that lingers. They have pressures that interrupt their sleeps. They have the instability of rent, work, caregiving, raising children in a world that feels increasingly unstable. While we're talking about what's happening in the world, some people can't focus on what's happening in the world because of what's happening in their homes. Some have even stopped expecting that things will get better. These are the same people that we're asking to take action. We're asking these people to register voters, to join coalitions, and to show up for justice. But we cannot mobilize people who are themselves barely holding on. So we need to care for our people. Say the word care. Say it out loud. And so what I want to do for just a moment is to center congregational care. Say the word again, care. The roles of class leader, steward, and trustee were created to meet this exact condition. It's not about symbol, it's not about counting money, it's not about collecting dues, it's about creating a structure of care, of protection, training, and readiness. Our foreparents built this institution, built these structures into the church, and these are the structures that hold the church when the world cannot. Class leaders, stay close enough to notice what's shifting. Now, will you do this for me? Turn and look at your neighbor. Just eyeball them for a sec. Don't look at me. I'm good looking, but look at them. So keep looking while I say this. The notion, keep looking at them, not me. Whenever I do these workshops on class leaders, I talk about the discomfort of seeing and being seen. But that is the work. To be like Jesus, to see, and then seeing, to be moved with compassion, to meet the one you've seen in the point of their need. Just tell your neighbor before you look back up here, I see you. Yeah. The class leader is designed to stay close enough to notice what is happening, to notice the shifts. The class leader hears when the work is lost. They hear when the family member dies. They see when the grief starts to harden. They carry the responsibility of making sure that no one disappears when life gets heavy. Then we have stewards to undergird the work of the ministry, to manage the resources that allow for the ministry to meet real needs. And when the class leaders see the trouble, the steward activates what's already been set aside, not in panic, not in performance, not in manipulation, but to give the faithful what God needs for them to have. And then trustees have to protect the space. I said protect the space, to ensure that the church remains rooted in the communities where schools close, where hospitals consolidate, where there are no grocery stores, and where institutions fall away. And the trustees must guard to ensure that the people can worship in safety. So when these roles function as they were intended, the church holds. People are not overlooked. Needs can be addressed before they become emergencies. Resources can move and weight can be distributed, and leaders don't burn out and members don't drift. I believe And I'm arguing that this is where the work of justice begins, with this stability in the church, because people cannot fight well when they are depleted. People cannot endure when they are not cared for. Every movement that has lasted understood this. The civil rights movement drew its strength from the church that fed people, housed people, prayed with people, checked on their families, and gave them something to come home to after the march was over. And so the AME Church today must decide whether it will keep asking more of people who are already exhausted, or return to this structure that has sustained us and made engagement possible. We have to train the laity of the church, class leaders as ministers of presence and attention, teaching stewards how to handle resources with transparency and trust, and equipping trustees to do their work to safeguard the people and not just the property. So we have to be clear about our expectations. We have to be consistent in support and accountable for what we say we value. Congregational care is justice work. Congregational care is justice work. Giving care to the people in the congregation is the work of justice. When the church becomes a place where people are held when they are falling apart, when they are prayed for and ministered to as they transition through different stages and the vicissitudes of life, when they are strengthened for long periods of labor, this is resistance. And I'm saying, sisters and brothers, we already have the structure. We already have the legacy. All we need is the tenacity and the discipline to use what we already have. The people grieving today are the same people who can carry on this next stage of the work. And our role is to make sure that they are not asked to do it alone.
Getting ready. Let me apologize to Dr. Charles Boyer, who leads the Council of Bishops Special Task Force dealing with mass incarceration. He will also be the first speaker on this panel after we hear from Dr. Kareem Creighton of the Brennan Center. And remember, to our virtual audience, please begin to put your questions and comments in the chat that our tech team will be able to share it with us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kareem Creighton. I'm the Vice President for Washington, D.C. at the Brennan Center for Justice. We're a nonpartisan law and policy think tank that focuses on defending democracy so that it works for everyone in this country. I'm here at the invitation of Jackie DuPont Walker, and I'm so delighted to be able to speak to you all, members and leadership within the AME Church, about a pressing matter, probably the most pressing one we have at present, which is the maintenance of our system that actually is of, by, and for the people. I want to start by talking a little bit about the situation. I don't think I have to do a lot because you see the news, I'm sure, just like I do. Then talk some about civil society and the role in particular that the church and the AME Church can play in this effort to try to push back against this challenge. And then finally talk a little bit about what the Brennan Center is doing. And of course, invite you all to participate in ways that can be aligned with your interests and concerns. So to start, let's talk a little bit about the thing. What is happening right now in our society? We, of course, are faced with, if not unprecedented, rare challenges to two basic principles that define America. One, that we have a rule of law, that law is supreme, no one person, no ideology, but the law, which is applied to everyone, is what guides power in this country. And then second, that every person who is entitled to cast a vote have an equal, fair chance at having that vote count. In both respects, we're seeing challenges to those principles. On one hand, with respect to the rule of law, we're seeing this administration, unfortunately, question the legitimacy of courts, the bodies that are intended finally to help interpret our laws, the Supreme Court of the United States that gives us a final statement about what its understanding of the Constitution is, our supreme law of the land. That's very disturbing, and this is all that more remarkable because, of course, this president appointed 3 members of said court. So we have a real challenge here to whether or not law as it's been understood is law that will continue to apply. The second goes to the right to vote. And while, of course, this is an election season, never forget, in 2025, we have elections in 2 large states, Virginia and New Jersey, and a smattering of other states at different levels, Mississippi being one of them. And what we see is a president who has adopted executive orders, not laws, but an executive order that says to the country that we want to have a system where essentially we cut off about 21 million voters who are currently eligible to vote out of the system by employing rules like voter ID rules that are even more strenuous than some of the ones that are in existence on the books, etc. So we have a system where now we are having to fight over the matters of whether or not we will have an equally weighted vote. This is to say nothing of the various challenges to the Voting Rights Act, which are currently being considered in courts, some of which unfortunately are participating in the same strand to pull back on the commitment to the rule of law. One argument is, just for an example, is that, well, private citizens can no longer bring discrimination claims under the Voting Rights Act, that it can only be brought by the Department of Justice. And as we know, the Department of Justice is currently being gutted. This is a real challenge to, I think, the fair and proper allocation of power in this country. And that's what I think we all have to be mindful and, frankly, very concerned about at this time. So what does that mean in practice? Well, it means, oddly enough, that state and local governments, like those throughout the country that we have seen usually make the argument that we have rights that the federal government shouldn't push back on, they're now being challenged. You know, there are troops brought into the state of California over the course of the last week or so to put down what they describe, what the federal government describes as a violent set of lawbreakers, and not something that the governor of that state of California believes is true. And we saw, unfortunately, the worst example of that use of federal force evident in the pushing out and, frankly, handcuffing of the sitting U.S. Senator from California, Alex Padilla, who was there partly because of his oversight duties as ranking member of the Department of Homeland Security Committee in the United States Senate. These are very disturbing moments because even those people who are charged with keeping our government honest are now under siege. So what does this mean? This means civil society really has to step up. And again, I'm not telling something to you that you don't already know. The church, in particular the Black church, has had a very special role in maintaining assurance to people who've been left out, lost, and forgotten. And that, unfortunately, now is a growing number of people. But the good news is that there are elements of civil society that has a record of doing this and has the skills to make that happen. And so we're going to have to lean more on those institutions and working in network with each other to make that happen. And so the AME Church has, again, every reason to be at the forefront of that topic, both in making sure that people are informed about what the law is, but also things that they can do, both in terms of networking with each other, but also speaking to their elected members to make certain that government is held to account. What are we doing? Well, the Brennan Center, as I said, is a nonpartisan law and policy organization, but we take no backseat to anyone and telling what the law is to the public, including to government. We have, for that reason, sued the Trump administration in two different respects. One on that executive order that I talked about involving the changes to the election system, which would really be the largest federal rollback of voting rights we've seen in the modern era. We've gone to court. We've gotten a temporary restraining order on stopping the excesses of that executive order. Second thing we've done is to challenge one of the efforts by the federal government to start rounding up and deporting people out of the country without due process. We've been successful so far, but all of this stuff gets, of course, resolved in the United States Supreme Court, but we are continuing to work there. We're also continuing to work to make sure that the public understands what the law is and how to be effective in pushing back against what we see as excesses. In the fall, we're going to co-host, in fact, an event at Berkeley, at the School of Public Policy, to explore some of the ways that different institutions, including churches, have been active in developing strategies to push back against the organizations, the different agencies in the federal government where there have been excesses. And so we hope that that's going to be a very fruitful conversation. We certainly would invite you to attend that. And then finally, we are talking to voters. I think one of the things we've learned in the last election is there wasn't a Democrat or Republican who won that election. It was ultimately non-voters. And by that I mean that there were more people in this country than ever before not choosing to vote. And most of that has to do with people feeling left out. And as you know, if we don't learn that lesson now, to try and address how it is that people understand what is useful and important to help them address their problems in life, or whether they want to send their kids to school or they want to buy a home, we are going to fail any other conversation about how we push back against an administration, this one or another one, that exceeds its legal authority. So we want to understand that throughout the country. How are people thinking about the fair and proper use of government power so that we can come up with solutions and help elected leaders come up with solutions that address that? Anyhow, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope the conversation is a fruitful one. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person and in real time, but I'm wishing you all the best on this wonderful and important conference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I too apologize for not being able to be there. Flight was canceled because of the weather. I just want to lift up and recognize my bishop, Bishop Samuel Lawrence Green Sr., certainly to Bishop Jackson, great mentor of mine, and another great mentor of mine, Jackie DuPont Walker. We hear some recurring themes, and I appreciate from Dr. Beelan and also from Dr. Creighton about how our folks have been disengaged, mostly because they are dealing with the hardships of just being Black in this context. And so I just want to frame a few remarks around understanding what we as AMEs must do to pivot towards ministry in the age of Black persecution. African Methodism calls us to be custodians of a sacred theology, one that is born in resistance, sustained by faith, and now must rise again under renewed persecution. We're living in the United States context, specifically under an era of a new Jim Crow. And these policies, which I don't need to go over in great detail with you, we all know what they are: the attacks against education, the rollback of civil rights, the rollback of healthcare supports, DEI rollbacks. We all know this, but if we look at the history of the AME Church, we started as the Free African Society, which was a mutual aid organization founded to support Black people who were denied dignity, opportunity, and resources. And that same spirit has to guide us now. I think it's sad to say, but I think it's very true, and I stand on it. Integration as a social experiment has failed to protect us. So we must reimagine Black mutual aid in 2025, not as a retreat from society, but as a strategic advance towards self-sufficiency. So I challenge us to think about, what does building Black infrastructure through the church look like? So if our education is being attacked, what does it look like to rebirth freedom schools, establish church-based freedom schools, establish learning institutions? I think it is mind-boggling that we have outsourced our teaching our history to our children to the people that hate us. Even when we look biblically, when the Hebrews were liberated from Egypt, they did not look to Pharaoh and the Egyptians to teach them their history. God demanded that passing on history and the experience with God was taught through the church. And so we too have to begin to think about how we build educational structures for our people, from our people. Because if this current situation has taught us anything, it has taught us how incredibly vulnerable we are, because we have built nothing internally, but rather we have outsourced every need of our community to a people who can decide whether or not they want to shut the spigot off. So we also have to think about things like food sovereignty and building Black food networks. Think about the infrastructure of the AME Church, and if we put that in action to partner with Black farmers. Think about if we began to build urban agricultural initiatives. Think about if all our local churches and even on our presiding elder districts regionally began thinking like building out Black farmer markets, food co-ops, and buying clubs. Think about if we bought our food in bulk from Black farmers, what that can do, both in terms of food security amongst our people, but also building economic engines and self-sustainability. And think about what it does for us in terms of health, because we create larger pathways towards healthiness and nutrition when we're buying from our own people. Then we also have to think about, how do we build global Black business networks? The power of African Methodism is that it is a pipeline that is connected to Blackness all throughout the globe. So what if we were doing things like creating a Black digital directory where we knew all the Black-owned businesses all throughout the diaspora? I've started in these past several months, every time I'm about to feel the knee-jerk reaction to go to Amazon or to go to the store, whatever it is that I used to buy, I do the research to find who Black makes this same thing. We have to begin to shift how we do what we always do. Even think at the local church level about church procurement policies that make sure whoever's buying for the church looks to first try everything they can to buy Black. And if we're building Black business showcases and expos at the church, and building global diaspora partnerships. There are Black businesses in Africa, Black businesses in the Caribbean, Black businesses in Latin America. And then we have to build ministries of economic liberation, entrepreneurship incubators, use church spaces to hold business development programs, micro grant and loan funds. Think about if we were pulling things together so that we can give small think if we were taking up offerings to offer micro loans for people who trying to start businesses, youth entrepreneurship programs, and support for folks coming home from incarceration who we know can't get a job anywhere else. But what if we set them up as entrepreneurs? We have to think about building Black-owned housing infrastructures, church-led housing cooperatives, community land trusts, tenants' rights and legal aid ministries, home ownership educations. And just to wrap some of this up, we also have to learn from history. History taught us that when we built our own communities, they came they stole it by force. And I know we are Christians and we turn the other cheek, but we also know when it's appropriate to pick up a sword. And so we have to think about safety and security. We know what happened to Mother Emanuel. We are in that season. We have to think about how are we protecting the Black immigrants in our congregations. And so finally, sisters and brothers, as we think about mobilizing the African diaspora to create a global Black network, not only thinking about how we are supporting each other economically through trade and through resources, can we also mobilize the global Black community regarding pushing back against Western white colonization? We have to keep our eyes stayed on liberating the global Black community. What does it look like for the AME Church to lead a charge, to go to the UN and bring charges against this administration? Those are things we can do because we have the strongest global Black infrastructure known to humanity. And we, the AME Church, can mobilize us across the Black diaspora to see how all of us are inextricably linked. And so we're doing a few things. The organization that I run, Salvation and Social Justice, we're working on a partnership with Turner Theological Seminary to help educate and train clergy in their local context to work on some of these things. And I'm prayerful that as the Council of Bishops Task Force around mass incarceration reconvenes, that we begin to think about some of these things, which I think are much greater than just the issue of mass incarceration. At this point in time, with our reality, the global Black community must think about not only how we survive, but how we go back to mutual aid and learn how to thrive, and how we are going to show up once again, how we grew back then by showing up every single place where Black people are persecuted and building out a mutual aid society. God bless you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Good afternoon. It is good to be with you this afternoon, and really thankful for the many good ideas that have been lifted up. And I'll just say that there's so much that I've heard of that I was cheering and in deep agreement with, and I'm going to just try not to repeat any of it, but focus on sort of one particular piece that for me I think is a central point in terms of the nuts and bolts of how we move some of this forward. So I want to begin by saying, as has been lifted up by multiple presenters, there is not one single solution. The reality is that we are in a season where we need to mobilize all of our energy and be able to move creatively in multiple directions. We need to be able to reweave some institutions and some traditions in our communities that have languished. And I think we need to start with an honest and a robust assessment of where we are. And I don't want to spend a ton of time in this space, but I do think it's really important because I think one of the things that has been sort of most challenging for me spiritually and in my work is, I think, a sense of sadness that I've experienced for where we are. So I'll take a quick moment to introduce myself again. My name is Reverend Mariama White Hammond. I serve as the founding pastor of New Roots AME Church. We are a AME church plant here in Boston, Massachusetts. And I know people say AME church plant. I think there's a tendency to believe that we don't do that, but we are an AME church plant here. We started about 8 years ago. And I also, until about a year ago, served as the chief of environment, energy, and open space for the city of Boston, which means that I oversaw the environment department, all of the climate and energy policies, the parks department, and all of our open space, as well as our cemeteries, animal control, a number of other things, historic preservation, and the Office of Food Justice. I took on the Office of Food Justice because I am also a farmer and a member of a Black cooperative farm of 10 Afro-descended people based in New England. So that's sort of the context with which I show up into the space, and would love at some other time to engage on all of the different things that I've heard, many of which are deeply exciting to me. But I want to be honest that I think in this moment, what has been most disturbing to me is that the way I've been saying to my congregation is that this is go time. This is the moment in which everything we have been building and sustaining up until this point should be being mobilized to face this moment. And what has been most distressing and at times depressing is how this moment has exposed the deep degradation of the institutions on which Black folks have relied for really the entirety of our existence in these United States. And so that has been hard. I think most pointedly, the reality is that the church overall, the Christian church overall, has been seeing record declines over the last 30 years. And that is true even more so in particularly white church traditions, but it is also true in the Black church tradition. We too have seen major declines in the number of people showing up, the level of embeddedness and sense of connection in our neighborhoods. And so in this season where we really should be on all cylinders mobilizing, we find that many of us are struggling. Now, I want to be transparent. I lead a small family church. The way we do not count our members based on who signs up. If we count them based on who shows up. We define a member as a person that we see on a regular basis, at least twice a month. Obviously we hope for more than that, but that is the way we look at it. And the way we define it, our congregation has about 40 active members, people who we see on a regular basis, who are regularly showing up to service, who are signing up for things. We have other people who come from time to time. I know we have the CME folks, as we talk, the Christmas, Mother Day, and Easter folks. We have some of those, but we do not count those as our sort of core congregants. And what I find is it is really hard when you are pastoring and serving a small congregation to try to do all of the things that just keep you in good standing within the AME church. But what I want to suggest is that I believe in this season, it makes the most sense to put the large majority of our energy into revitalizing one institution in the church which we have allowed to languish, and that would be the class system. My argument would be that in a season where our resources are tapped and strapped, the class system offers us an opportunity to do three things at the same time that I think are essential in this moment. The first is a deep spiritual practice. And the reality is, we are at a moment where nothing we could do just in our own strength or within our own thinking could match the moment that we are in. This is spiritual warfare. And while I do believe we have to mobilize in all of the different ways that we traditionally do as activists and as citizens, if the Lord is not on our side, we really do not have a chance of winning this battle. And I would say that in many ways, in our communities, we do not have the level of prayer warriors that we need to. We do not have enough clarity on what we believe, on who God is. Many of our folks don't know the Bible. They could tell you Jesus said anything, and people would not know if it's true or not because we have not spent the time in the Word. And so I think my first reasoning for why we need a strong and healthy class system is to revitalize our spiritual preparedness for this moment. But the second piece is, and I think as Dr. Boyer mentioned just before me, is that we also need a system that allows us to really take care of people and create the kind of connection and solidarity that we will need to sustain ourselves through this time. Many of the programs, government programs, workplace opportunities that we have benefited from are being stripped away. And if we do not have a unit of engagement that allows our people to show up for each other in very real and tangible ways, then we will not make it through this. And so the first is to revitalize ourselves spiritually. The second is to build those deep systems of solidarity and care. And then the final is to exercise our God-directed necessity to engage socially in the kinds of actions that would not just help our congregants, but also revitalize our communities. And so at our congregation, we've always talked about class systems from the very beginning, but we've been really spending the last 6 months helping people to delve into what class groups could look like and rethinking them. Our class groups are meeting either weekly or bi-weekly, really thinking about how they might have different sets of themes so people actually opt into class groups. We have everything from class groups that are very just connectional, an opportunity for someone new to get to know other members of the church. We have a healing small group, and we do call them small groups. The class system, the word class does not necessarily speak to people in the same way that it might have in John Wesley's time. And so we do call them small groups, but we have made sure that people know that we are historically drawing from the leadership and from the example of the class system. But anyway, we have everybody, and my call to our congregation is, if you are not in a small group, then you're not really an active member of this congregation. Everybody is called into a small group. Some of them lean a little bit more around spiritual practice. So we do, like I said, have a healing small group. We have a prayer small group. Some of them lean a little bit more towards connection. And so we have one that's mostly for new members, where there's some new members class connected to that piece. We have a group that just formed a couple weeks ago called the Next Supper, and they gather around food. And then some of them lead a little bit more towards the kind of social action that we want to promote. So we have a community of folks that the church overall bought a house in collaboration with another parachurch organization, and that house is becoming an intentional community, both to allow our members to be able to stay in the community that we are based in. The prices have risen astronomically. I'm sure many other people are experiencing this wherever you are around the country and around the world. And then also to serve as a home base of ministry to that community. And so each small group has a slightly different focus, but the goal is that every single one would have spiritual practice, relational connection, and a missional, vocational focus to it. And some of them, like I said, the healing small group, some of what they'll do is just provide some safe spaces and retreat spaces for other people, right? Yeah, so that's a very low lift in terms of what they do missionally and in terms of their vocation. But again, the goal is to reclaim something out of our historical tradition that allowed our Zion to grow to what it is today, and allow us to tap into that to face the moment that we're in. And so I could talk a lot more about other things. I'll just mention a couple little things that I'm not gonna try to touch on. I'm trying to keep to my time. But I do think there are some real conversations that we as a Black church, and particularly as the AME church, there's some real conversations we need to have. There are conversations we need to have about generational divides that are limiting our effectiveness. We need to have a real conversation around issues of justice and LGBTQ inclusion that are causing some of those divides, particularly between older and younger folks. There's a lot of spaces in which I think we could create more opportunity to go deeper and to build our Zion stronger and more unified, so that we have the capacity to do all of the different pieces. But I lift up the class system, and I want to give a shout out to Reverend Beelan, because we just got our copies of the class leader system guide for all of our leaders here. But part of this is about if we want boots on the ground and we want to be able to live out all of these different pieces, we actually have to have units of engagement that make sure that people are connecting with God, connecting with each other, and then connecting to those central action issues to which we are called. And I believe that the class leader system is one of the most powerful tools, because it can work in a small church, it can work in a big church. You don't have to have everybody got in. You could just get started with a couple of class groups in your congregation. But I think it is one of the most practical tools that I think we can access in this moment to be active and effective in this season. So with that, I'll close out. I'm trying to keep to my time. I'm really thankful for this work. Wish I could be with you there in person, but I hope that we will continue this conversation, because I do believe this is a moment where God calls us to be the church, maybe like we never have been before. And we need to tap into the wisdom of those who've gone before us, so that we can do this leg of the journey faithfully and effectively. Blessings to all of you, and I look forward to continued conversation.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm Julianne Malveaux, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, economist, author, member of Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C., and I come to talk to you about the economy and education and reparations. But let me begin with the economy. What we just learned from this person who spent $45 million on a parade or a birthday tribute, if you will, what we've learned since that man, I try not to curse, and I know if I mentioned his name, I would be cursing. I also now must always refer to the house that enslaved people built, because our work is, they're attempting to erase our history and our legacy. And so rather than call it the you know what house, let's just call it the house that enslaved people built, to remind ourselves constantly of what the contribution of Black people has been to this country. There would be no United States in its present form were it not for African American people, enslaved African American people who built everything from the House to the Congress to the Senate. Had they left us alone at the end of enslavement, and let's acknowledge Juneteenth coming on Thursday, had they left us alone and just gave us a 40 acres and a mule or not, and just allowed us to thrive, we'd be fine. We would not have any drama. Between 1880 and 1910, in 1880, the wealth gap was $1 Black dollar for every $36 white people had. By 1910, that had been cut more than in half to $1 for every $16 that white people had. Today, it's $1 for every, depending on whose numbers you use, $10 or maybe $7 that white people have. But dig this, between 1880 and 1910, we made more relative progress than we've made between 1910 and today. Why is that? Because deliberately and systematically, people tried to steal our stuff. In other words, laws were passed to exclude us. Land was distributed without us. Laws were passed to limit the ways that we could work. It's a litany, and I won't go into all of it because, again, we're time limited, but I do want to associate myself with the previous comments that others have made, because I think that people are thinking along parallel lines about the work that we need to do. And one of the things is the issue of the collective. I think that what Reverend Boyer said about basically boycotts. He didn't say boycotts. So let's look at Jamal Bryant, our descendant of AME, who's now at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta. The Target boycott has been brilliant. It has been absolute. But then we need to, are we funding our own oppression? In other words, we need to look at who we spend our money with and where and what they're doing to us. The attack on DEI, again, if you're shopping at those places, you're funding your own oppression. You're saying it's okay to oppress me. And understand the number of Black folks who have lost jobs because of the attacks on DEI. But to get back to the economy and to deal with it up front, what we're looking at is an economy that's in full tank. The World Bank has now said that within the next 3 years, we'll see the worst economies that we've seen since the 1960s. That's kind of scary. As I mentioned, the wealth gap, and we really need to look at that wealth gap and what it means. We are not creating intergenerational wealth. We are not dealing with the fissures in the system. And we've been very complacent about it, folks, extraordinarily complacent. And the Black middle class and the Black upper class has a lot to answer for in this context, because we've just, we have those of us who had good government jobs now find out how good those government jobs were when hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs. Now, the courts, as the brother from the Brennan Center mentioned, the courts have been the holding it back, but he has appointed, I don't know how many justices at the intermediate level, and so we're ending up with the economic attacks. And I'll talk a little bit about how we fight back, but these are economic attacks. One of the things that I'm passionate about and have been writing about, talking about, finishing a book on is reparations. Now, a lot of people will think that reparations is a pie in the sky because, white folks not going to ever give it to you. Well, they don't have to give it to us. We have to take it. And how we take it with legislation, anyone who has done us harm through enslavement owes. And there are over 60 municipalities around the country, Boston, California, New York State, that are looking at the issue of local reparations. But we also need to look at national reparations. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley has picked up the baton that John Conyers started with in 1989, that Sheila Jackson Lee continued with, and that now Ayanna Pressley is pushing, which is H.R. 40. And I would implore you all to look at H.R. 40, to support H.R. 40, to ask your local members of Congress to support H.R. 40. What it is a bill that looks at what reparations should be and how it should happen. It used to just be a study bill. Let's study reparations. But we've had many studies. The California study is over 900 pages long. So we can study, but what the HR 40 version 2 is the version that says, after you studied it, what do we do about it? Because the wealth gap will never close, frankly, unless we have reparations. And the wealth gap basically determines so many of our life chances. Now, when you look at Project 2025, and many of you have, and it's important, we look at Project 2025, I call it the FAFO bill, and y'all don't need to know what that means if you don't. I won't speak to it on a call full of clergy people. But basically, this man told you everything that he intended to do, and he's doing it. Deportations are inflationary. He came in saying, I'm going to manage the economy. Well, he hasn't. He absolutely has not managed the economy. We've got inflation. Unemployment has stayed steady, but that's just for now. So we have an economy that, frankly, is on the verge of collapse. These tariff wars are inflationary. Tariffs are nothing more than taxes. And for all of us who go to our sorority and fraternity conventions this summer, if they didn't order the bags a long time ago, next convention, you're going to see them as a lot more expensive than they are now, because most of those bags and convention paraphernalia is produced where? China. And so we're really looking at this tariff situation. Nobody ever thought it would go down like this, but it has gone down like this. And it affects, we can talk about it at the 30,000 foot level, but let's talk about the sister who was buying her groceries at the dollar store. I mean, do they even have dollar stores anymore for $1? But now you have a lot of people who are going to be paying a lot more. The administration and others focused on the price of eggs, but there's so many other things that prices have increased on. And this is a function of this weak economy. And again, the question with this weak economy is, are we funding our own oppression? Personally, I advise people to keep their money in their pocket. Although quite frankly, that could be recessionary as well, because 2/3 of our gross domestic product is from consumer spending. However, something's going to happen. We know it. And we're better off, looking at the difference between our wants and our needs and making a decision about what we spend our money on and what we don't spend our money on and who we spend our money with. So which allows me, so I've talked about reparations is not just about a check, by the way. A lot of people go directly to a check, but it's more about any number of things. Our health infrastructure, I want to read a passage from Marcus Hunter, who's written this book about reparations. It's called Radical Reparations. It's a really good book. And he says, freedom is both large and small. Large freedoms lost, like language, family, autonomy, and land, undoubtedly important. But so too are the small freedoms lost, like the ability to smile. The breeze swirled around me, a new awareness unlocked. I realized that any idea of repair and restoration enslavement must recognize all the freedoms lost, especially the small ones. Because of the wisdom of the elders, little things add up to big things. So he makes a case for not just money reparations, but also the restoral of our energy, the restoral of our sense of community, the restoral of our communications networks. All of these are things that were deliberately attacked. Deliberately attacked in the post-Reconstruction period. And into now, lynching culture means a white person or anyone could do anything to a black person and expect to have no repercussions. And so we look at lynching culture in the context of reparations. What we look is that land lost, but land grabs. In 1896 in Paris, Texas, 2 black men were lynched. There were more probably at other times, but that particular case stood out for me. Both of them were asked, nor told. They were told by their white neighbors, you need to sign your land over to me. I laugh because that's preposterous. Well, they didn't. So they were both lynched at separate times in the same year. The younger one was lynched immediately, the older one later in the year. And then a newspaper reporter wrote an article that said, well, the young one was arrogant, so we should have lynched him. But the older one was going to die anyway, and we could have taken his land. How much land loss has there been in our community, and how has that affected, essentially, our wealth? And wealth is mobility. Wealth is any number of things. We know what it is. It's not what you cop, as Lauryn Hill said. It's what you keep. And we have not been keeping as much as we could be. And so there is a level of lack of flexibility. So I want to pivot. The reparations is really important. Please support HR 40. But I want to pivot to education because education and economics are connected. And of course, the assault on the Department of Education is really an assault on us. Title III Title III from the Department of Education is when I was a college president, we called it the President's Fund because the president could use that Title III money for any kind of campus improvement that he or she chose to. So in my case, as an example, at Bennett College, we repaved parts of the sidewalks that were crumbling because people had fallen, we had lawsuits. So that was an educational purpose. Title III is going to be gone, as is Title I, which deals with our K through 12 students. Now, what is this man up to with education? In my mind, if you dumb down the population, and he likes uneducated people, he said if you dumb down the population, then you basically don't have possibilities or opportunities for people to learn and grow. First, you take civics out of the schools, which they've done, take sports out as well. but then you also basically dumb it down in such a way that people will believe anything. And if you look at what some of these MAGA people are saying, they literally do believe everything. They do not believe that fat meat is greasy. What they believe is that the elections were stolen. Well, this is just not the truth. If you could read, you would understand this is not the case. And as the brother from Brennan said, the attacks on voting are also attacks on literacy. So I think that, when we look at the economy, and so when you look at the economy, you have to look at education because the two are intertwined. If you end up creating what Marx called the reserve army of the unemployed, if you also end up creating a cadre of people who are not critical thinkers because they haven't had education, what you end up is with sheep and lemmings who will follow literally anything and will basically work for almost anything, will take less wages, will believe the hype that immigrants are stealing their jobs. I don't know any able-bodied African American who is willing to go pick lettuce in California. Just think about it. So they keep saying the immigrants are taking our jobs. Immigrants are taking jobs that many of us Americans do not want. And in addition to not taking our jobs, we need those immigrant workers as our labor force shrinks a bit. Not a lot, but shrinks a bit. And when we see that, it's work that we don't want to do, and it's also work that we will need folks for. And again, if you dumb down the population, you reduce our ability to compete internationally, and basically you hand our lunch to China. Now, I'm not mad at China. China's doing their thing. They're a little crooked. They steal our trademarks, and they do all kind of stuff like that. But they're investing in education while we're divesting from education. They're building schools of engineering while we're talking about closing schools. In the HBCU land, I mean, we've lost, many of our HBCUs are in trouble. There have been accreditation issues. And I have to just scold us for not supporting our HBCUs. Whether you went to an HBCU or not, adopt one, support one, because this is often, when you look at the climate on our PWI campuses, this is often where some of our young people are going to get their educations. And believe me, an HBCU education is by and large a very good education. But we need those educations in order for our young people to thrive. I could go on and on. Those of you who know me know that that would be the case. But I'm not going to, because I know Jackie has asked me to be concise. And so I want to just say a couple of things about what we can do. First of all, I think we must address the wealth gap issue in our churches, with conversations, with our economic development issues. Our churches must address the issues of the wealth gap. And when we address it, we have to address it both externally, the black-white wealth gap, but also internally in terms of the class issues that we experience in our own communities. So that's number one, is we have to deal with the wealth gap. Number two, we must deal with the reparations issue. If you have not signed on to HR 40 or called your member of Congress to do that, please do. It's really important legislation. I know a lot of people say, well, it's a long shot. But guess what? We had almost 200 co-sponsors in 2022. In 2020, every Democratic presidential candidate supported some form of reparations. Reparations are rising. It's an idea with time has come. And what has to happen with reparations, not all Black Americans support it, but we must. We must talk about ways that we can close the wealth gap. And on the education tip, there are two things. Number one, we recently lost an ancestor. We lost Reverend Cecilia Bryant, mom of Jamal Bryant, who was a long-term AME minister. I met her, I can't even tell you, when I was a grad student at MIT. So that was like 79, 80. And she used to always say, you have not done your work unless you replicated yourself 7 times. So in terms of education, how are you replicating yourself? Who are you mentoring? Who are you passing the torch on to? It's a challenge. But the second piece on education is I would challenge our churches to begin Saturday schools. I'm writing a piece now about Saturday schools, about why they're important. Back in the day, Malcolm X said, only a fool will allow the enemy to educate their children. Only a fool will allow the enemy to educate their children. So we're sending our young people to schools where they have all kind of stupidity going on, where they have little children playing master and slave, where the black kids get to be the slaves and the white kids get to be the masters. I don't think so. So if we're sending our children to these schools, we need to take them home and basically debrief them, or, debrief them. I'll tell you about Louise Little for just a second. Louise Little was Malcolm X's mother, who ended up spending 25 years incarcerated in a mental institution. Why was she incarcerated? Because she colored outside the lines. When her kids came home from school, she interrogated them. What did they tell you? And she would tell them, oh, no, that's wrong. Oh, no, that's wrong. But the other reason that white folks were mad at Louise Little is because she and her husband, Earl Little, had purchased land in a restricted covenant area. Now, they didn't know that they bought land in a restricted covenant area. They bought it. The white folks sold it to them, and they started farming it and doing whatever else. And so back to the brother who said we need to farm our own food, that was what if she didn't have a job, she had that land. They could eat off that land. Now, thinking about that, they wanted that land. She was adamant she was not giving up their land. And she was not only adamant, she was adamant and insistent. And that's why they said she was crazy and put her in a mental institution. There's more to the story than that. Won't tell you all that. Go on my webpage. I think I wrote a column on it that may be on there. But in any case, what we're seeing here is we have to educate our own children. You cannot expect the enemy to educate your children. And quite frankly, it's not a racial enemy. It's the institutions of predatory capitalism that extract surplus value from us. That's how they got a wealth gap, because we used to be somebody else's wealth. That's why we need reparations. And that's why we need to audit our education system, replicate ourselves, and ensure. Go to PTA, if you go to PTA meetings, go to school meetings, hold these people accountable. This anti-DEI movement is an attempt to erase us. It's an attempt to say we didn't do what all we said we did. And so we have to keep our history and our legacy alive. Nobody will do it for us. So I think I've used up my time, but if I didn't, I'll yield the balance of my time back to somebody else. And again, say thank you to Jackie Dupont Walker for allowing me to be part of this. Thank you to you all for listening. And again, reparations now. Thank you. Light's still on. That must mean I have a little more time. Is that the case? I guess not.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Gaiman. I am the Director of Operations at the 6th District AME office under the direction of Bishop Michael L. Mitchell. And it is a pleasure to be here today. And I just want to thank all the previous speakers for highlighting issues, highlighting the challenges. And as I heard them talk, there was a familiar theme that went through. And one of the things I wanted to focus on is I often talk to folks and they're like, okay, this is what's going on, but what do we do? How do we handle? How do we motivate our churches or even put us in situations to sort of get things done?
I've been doing operations and projects with at the sixth district for about 7 years now, and well, just thinking the other day about some of the things we did. We started out with putting together plans to get people to vote, voter education, voter engagement, which is different than voter mobilization, strictly the effort to get them to the polls come election time. We did a census overlay program that not only worked, which was led by the AME Church, but included all the African American denominations, some non-denominational churches in the state of Georgia. We did food distribution during the early part of COVID, developed grants for churches to have COVID vaccines at their churches, develop garden programs that we can grow box gardens and small quarter-acre farms at churches, helped by the expertise of Black farmers to talk about food distribution or even to supplement local food pantries. I started thinking to myself, how were we able to do these things? What are the main components? Came up with three things. The first one is leadership. Whether you're at a district level, whether you're at a federally elected or appointed level, whether you're at a church level, leadership is important. Leadership determines success in my experience. And then you got organizational leadership at the district level, at churches, at projects. You may have 4 projects at your camp, at your church. Maybe what kind of leadership do you have on those 4 projects? And then the thing that I think is probably most important, at least at the work at the 6th District, was partners. And we have primary partners who some serve to assist us with all of our efforts. One of those is Black Voter Matters. Some with specific efforts like our Clean Energy Program and the Hive Fund, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. And the backbone to all of this is the 6th District Office, which sort of oversees social justice projects and gives support to elders, to specific churches, in order to achieve some of these efforts. I want to talk specifically about, and whatever project you want can be substituted, because it's how do we put ourselves in a position to achieve some of these projects. We've been doing a clean energy program now for 2.5 years. The last year and a half, we sort of got our footing together. We had to change from an original partner to an existing partner. We have 93 churches in the district that would like more information on our clean energy program. We've developed feasibility studies for 18 churches. We have 5 churches that are moving towards construction. But the backbone of that is, how did we get that done? Our bishop has always been strong and led us to the rules of how. We want to do feasibility studies, but we want it to be equal opportunity for all churches. There are some churches that are a little more financially stable, that have greater human capital than others. So the bishop made a decision that he would not ask any church to pay for a feasibility study. We would raise the money and have the partners and expertise to provide a feasibility study, which answers all the questions that congregations would have. What is a clean energy hub? It includes solar, it includes battery storage, it includes, and I will leave my information if anyone's interested in clean energy. It includes EV storage. It includes bidirectional charging. It includes energy efficiency. Okay. So we did that. And then we started the work. I am proud to say, in the first years, and I think this is equal with most of our churches, we do have a capacity issue. And sometimes when we talk at a high level, and churches say, well, I'd love to get some of those things done, but I have a hard time getting somebody to handle this single Saturday program. So we do have to do things. And when we talk about good partners, our partners must understand. I often have conversations with partners who want access to our greatest assets, our members, their families, and our physical churches. But yet, I'm working on a project with them. They have 6 people on staff, paying market wages, they're paying benefits, they have overhead. This isn't something that we have. So even if whether we're going to do joint fundraising, whether you take some of the funds that you target to market to our community and share that with us to help us build our infrastructure, because that is something that we must do. If I stay with our clean energy program, I'm excited to let everybody know this past month we received for the first time core operating grants, a 3-year core operating grant and a 2-year core operating grant. This will allow us to staff up a little better. This will allow us to give additional assistance to churches that want to do this work but do not have the infrastructure. We have some great churches, our large ones. About a third, from my perspective, about a third of our churches have early retirees. They have people that are into technology and can help on things like this. But you have some, the average age of our members, between 62 and 64 years old. So you have some who have capable people. They may be a little intimidated by this high technology, but in the 6th district, we've done a great opportunity partnering with our partners on clean energy to give us information, to come to churches, to make presentations, and to understand our needs. But what we also do, we're real firm that this is a 6th district program. And there are things that we require of our partners to be good partners. You're not going to come in and say, oh, well, we're going to be the primary person of installation. Oh, we're going to be the only one who does feasibility studies. No, that is not going to happen. Every church has a different need. You have to support the pastor, you have to support the lay and the organizations. You have to have them, you have to give them information in a way that they can digest. And that is how we've been able to take different projects, bring in the elders, educate pastors, let them know that we will fight for resources. I don't believe in telling people that they need to work all day and we can't provide them a little stipend for gas, getting back and forth and giving them lunch. They have decided to donate to us their time, which is the most valuable thing. And we also need to let our external funders know that that is a part of what they have to participate in to have access to our churches. It's not easy in the beginning, but once you start, they get a sense of what kind of work, they get to work with you, they will start to understand. I have specifics, which I don't want to get into because I don't want to let the thing alone. And I think people want to ask some questions. So that is where my focus is on how does small, medium, large churches start programs, seek funding, and work with great partners to help build the projects that they're doing. Thank you.
I thank to our panel. I think many are still on. Oh, look at the group. All right. Hi, guys. Okay. Many are still on, ready, available to answer questions. Any questions from here in the room? Are there any in the chat, Shanae? There are themes that I have heard. Congregational care, which is important. No one can be available to do the work God has called them to do, and we don't take care of the congregational care. Partnership within African Methodism, church to church. I don't know about you, but it's distressing when we have AME churches in the same town, almost the same neighborhood or section of town, who do nothing together except come together when called together. The work and ministry must be such that the impact of our church is felt, and very, very strongly. Each one of our presenters tied into the other, as God always does, connecting things well. And we will have that recording, but I hope you're getting from this the fact that we are doing things, and things that we're not even mentioning today because we don't know it. And we need to share that information. So if you know persons like our panelists whose talents, skills, and resources will be made available for doing this work, go to the AME main webpage, ame-church.com, click on the form that says talent survey, and let us know who those persons are, that we might bring them in, that what they are doing can be spread. We can scale up. We can make sure that if something is happening good in New Jersey, it can be spread and shared in Florida, it can be shared in California, and in Seattle, and Kansas City, and Nebraska, and Montana, and Wisconsin, and Cape Town, and around the world. It can happen, and that's what we really, really want to do. So in this section, I hope you understood that we're striking back. But as everyone has said, we are ready and here. This is our watch for times such as this. The preparation now is ready for the action, and that's where we are. We're going to move ahead quickly. I can consult with my chair so that we can stay on time. And we have a break, but we want you just to stand up, stretch, because our next panel is ready and anxious and ready to get going. Let me share with you what we're about to experience. We're about to experience a discussion about the strategy. How do we, at the Episcopal District Annual Conference and local church levels, along with external partners, organize, educate, motivate, and mobilize for the upcoming election season, which is right now. We just had an election in New Jersey. It was last week. There's one coming up in Florida in a week or two. We are not in a season where we can focus on 2028. Not even 2026. It is now. The local elections make a difference. You can see what happens when the folk at the local level are just looking to the federal level for their directions. How do we do that? And so we have Ms. Regina Thomas, a former Secretary of State in New Jersey and political consultant, who will basically talk to us about how we bring the election process, the mobilization process, into our faith walk. We know that's not a struggle for us as AMEs. We know that's what we believe. But what we really want to hear is some practical examples for that. We also have online, who do we have online, Shanae? Okay, and then we're going to start with Dr. Michael Waters, who on his own, in his community, serving the community, has been a shining light with the voter mobilization in the 10th Episcopal District. But when we had a little resources this last time, he went over the top. And so a shining example of how the AME Alert model, taken and made its own in his own work, can put social action and social justice ministries into perspective so that people see how it is serving the community and making a difference in every corner of our community, in every major institution, and more than anything else, in the lives of people who have not yet met Jesus Christ, and how he met them in that moment, and how we can do the same as we come up. So just stand, if you'll just stretch. I do the Dr. Roderick Beelan, I see you exercise for a moment, and just say, you know, every great movement started with a few people, and you're here for a great movement that is starting now. I would tell you, if everyone who said they marched with Dr. King had really been there at the beginning, it wouldn't have been room in the street. I'll remind you that when he was trying to get people to march with him in Montgomery, the first day he asked for volunteers, nobody showed up. The second day he asked for someone to go with him to march, nobody showed up. The third day he asked, is anyone going to show up? And does anyone know who showed up? The children. The children told their parents, we're going. And so just know, in our time, you have showed up today. You're part of the movement starting. And when the others come aboard, we'll be able to rejoice. But in the meantime, with our mustard seed faith, we're getting out of the boat and we're ready to start the movement. And so, strategy and training session, here we are. We're going to hear ways and see examples and hear from those who have walked the talk, and as they have evaluated that, are going to share with us those best practices and also a vision for the future. We're going to starting with Dr. Michael Waters, and then to Reverend Regina Thomas. A round of applause for Dr. Waters.
Indeed, to Bishop Jackson, to Dr. DuPont Walker, to our Bishop, Bishop Ronnie Elijah Brailsford Sr. Also want to acknowledge our president of the Women's Missionary Society, Dr. King, and to all of you. It is an honor to be with you to share a little bit about what's going on in the 10th Episcopal District. Organizing the 10th, I am the newly elected, or newly appointed, I should say, chair of Social Action and Social Justice Ministry, which really has risen out of our work around voting in these last 2 election cycles. So let's begin with the presentation. I want to set things in context by the numbers. In Texas, since 2012, there have been 750 polls closed in Texas. This is the most in the nation. And most of these poll closings have happened in communities where Black and Latinx populations are growing the fastest. Next slide. We have 9.6 million Texas voters who were eligible, but who did not vote in the 2022 midterm election. Next slide. We have 2.5 million eligible Texas voters who had previously voted, who did not vote in the 2022 midterm election. Next slide. We have 2.9 million eligible Black Texas voters as of 2022, in our last midterm election. Texas boasts more eligible Black voters than any other state in America. Next slide. But look at this. In 2018, the votes separating the victor and the loser in the 2018 Texas senatorial election were merely 219,000 voters, 2.6 points of separation. So let's deal with some myths about Texas. Next slide. Texas is not a red state. Texas is a non-voting state. Next slide. Texas is not a red state. Texas is a voter suppressed state. The greatest voter suppression in the nation, in fact. Next slide. Texas is not a red state. Texas is an unorganized state. We'll talk a little bit more about what this means. Next slide, please. When I served as the co-chair of Faith Forward Dallas out of Thanksgiving Square, which is the largest multi-faith movement in North Texas, we have about 350 congregations, temples, mosques who are part of that justice work. We brought in Bishop Barber to our congregation, Abundant Life AME Church, for a training of clergy. He was launching forth again the Poor People's Campaign on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination in 1968. And so we invited him to Dallas to begin that work in 2018. And we had this conversation about what it means to organize Texas. In particular, some of the challenges relating to organizing Texas versus other states. For instance, in his home state of North Carolina, which is not as large as Texas, in order to bring masses to the state capitol, it did not take as much energy. But look at this, next slide. Texas covers 268,596 square miles and over 31 million residents as of this past year. Second largest state by area and population. And so when you're trying to bring the masses together, particularly for a direct action toward a state legislator, it's particularly challenging, particularly when you're talking about working people, people with families, to mobilize the state and to bring them on an ongoing basis to provide a pressure on state legislators. It has some challenge. But the AME Church is uniquely qualified and gifted for this work. Next slide. It was W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903, the Souls of Black Folk, who said this: the AME Church is the greatest Negro organization in the world. I think we need to sit with that, hold that, and reclaim that truth. When he was doing the work of the Niagara Movement along with Bishop Reverdy Ransom, they were talking about the strength of the AME Church. And that strength, in fact, is known in our connection. And so while we were challenged in a real sense as organizers were coming outside of Texas, seeking to organize Texas, we recognized that we were uniquely gifted and blessed for the work of organizing Texas because we are already everywhere across the state of Texas. We've been there and we are connected to those communities. And so by the grace of God, with support from Social Action in partnership with Black Voters Matter in 2022, we received some resources for this work. Next slide, please. So very quickly, and we didn't have a long way to travel to get started with the work. We had to start fairly quickly. The election season was already upon us, but with a short runway, we got to work. And we broke down, which makes sense, our Episcopal district amongst our presiding elders districts. Each presiding elder district provided us with clergy and laypersons who are already doing the work in those particular regions and were able to connect us even more deeply with our local congregations. With the resources given and training provided, let me show you what we were able to do in 1 month. This October of 2022, in 1 month's time, we really only had 1 month, very short runway. We were able to reach almost 25,000 individuals and families across our Episcopal district. They got us thinking about what would happen if this happened on a continuous basis. That 200,000 voter difference between the victor and the loser in the senatorial election greatly diminishes. All right, next slide, please. And so here's just a little bit of what we accomplished. In the interest of time, I won't go through it all, but just in 1 month's time, the number of individuals we were able to engage through civic engagement activities, through signage and literature, through multiple presentations. Next slide, rise to the polls, through organization with other churches, through our social media impacts. And so in this last election cycle, we recognize that the electorate in Texas, in fact, is growing. There's now 18,623,931 registered voters, and this constituted the largest number of registered voters in Texas history. And so under our newly elected bishop, Bishop Brailsford, we went to work following the General Conference. We were able to hold 3 statewide voter education and mobilization Zoom meetings to coincide with our work already happening in the community. We are grateful that we had nearly 800 participants over these calls. And here's just a little bit of the work that was done. Work in the San Antonio district, work in the North Texas Annual Conference, in the Greater Dallas district, as well as the Tyler district. Next slide. All throughout the state, Paul Quinn districts, the Austin Capital District, people doing the work within their own context and within their own communities. We were able to engage Paul Quinn College, our university, our college, engage those young students around voter mobilization efforts. Not only that, but we're grateful for the work of our YPD, our lay organization, our Women's Missionary Society, and I believe that we are building the groundwork for greater work to come. Now, this picture, the reason I add this picture, because Dr. DuPont Walker wanted me to offer some words of how this work is intersecting. So this past August, prior to coming to the site of the General Conference, I was invited to present at the National Democratic Convention in Chicago. Some of you who were remembering what was happening in the New York Times, a major report had recently come out in August of this past year, that grassroots organizations were crying aloud that we are being underfunded, grossly underfunded, in terms of our engagement over social media and our engagement with younger voters. And in fact, there is a direct misinformation and disinformation campaign that is targeting young Black and Latino voters. And we need more money, we need more resources, we need better branding and better ways to engage this population. And unfortunately, a lot of those cries fell on deaf ears. We were able to keep on pushing, and with the organization that I have been a partner with, Vote Common Good, if you're interested, they did a write-up on us in Rolling Stone magazine during this last election cycle. I was tasked with the opportunity of trying to do a couple of things. One, within our own way, figure out ways in which we can engage this population of voters over social media to push back against these different disinformation campaigns, as well as go directly into communities, particularly with HBCUs, and engage young voters. So next slide, please. I want to play this video with you. This is a part of our work that we engage in a Deep South strategy tour. We started in Atlanta and pressed our way all the way back into Texas, engaging with communities, engaging with social justice leaders and civil rights leaders, and trying to find contents and ways of pushing this forward. And so we'll play this for you now. This is at...
Certainly we are rejoicing and we are glad into the Angel's house. My friend and brother, Dr. Elwood, certainly to you, Lady Elwood, and thank all of you for being present in this place on this day. Very quickly, Vote Common Good is a movement that encourages religious voters to vote with their neighbor in mind. What's going to improve the livelihood of my neighbor? Isn't that what God says? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and what your neighbor as yourself. And certainly we've been crisscrossing the country. We were just in Grand Rapids. We were in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Nashville. We're getting ready to embark upon now a Deep South tour, because we recognize that unfortunately in the midst of this election, there are certain constituencies that we're not properly engaging, and particularly our young people and HBCUs. And so we're going to do that as a part of this. We give the Lord a hand, be a part of empowering the Lord. Very quickly, because I don't have a lot of time. One, we have a table set up at the Family Life Center. We love for you to come and visit the table. We have information for you concerning facts and fiction for the Georgia election. We'd like you to come and leave your information with us as well. We also have a bus outside, and there are individuals all across the country who have literally been signing our bus. We want you to sign the bus today, all right? To carry this message, amen, as we go forth up around the country. If you have not registered to vote, this is your day. Give the Lord a hand clap of praise. Very quickly, in the book of Exodus, we find a word. It's my favorite Hebrew word. It's a word called zakar. Someone say zakar. Zakar is a word that we find in the Hebrew text when the Bible says that the cries of the people reach the ears of Elohim. And Elohim zakar the people. That means that God remembered them. But the blessing of the word of zakar is that it doesn't just mean remembrance, it means remembrance in action. It means that when I remember, I act, I take action because of what I remember. When I think of the goodness of God and all that God has done for me, I gotta do something. My soul cries out, hallelujah. It's remembrance with action. In the midst of this election season, I believe that God is calling us to zakar, to remember and to act. I'm going to remember the sacrifices of my ancestors. I'm going to remember the barriers that blocked him from voting. I'm going to remember those on Bloody Sunday. I'm going to remember Mary Evans. But not only am I going to remember my ancestors, I'm going to remember my mother and my father and my children. And I'm not just voting for my children. I'm going to remember my children's children. I'm going to vote for their future. Is there anybody here that's one of those? Let's worship God, let's rock the vote, and let's believe that eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, what God has in store.
And so we were able to flood social media, a number of these images and videos and reels in this fashion and other ways in order to push back against that disinformation campaign. This is a quick article that was featured. Thankful to our CIO that I wrote concerning the urgency of the vote in 2024. Next slide, please. Now, these are some disturbing issues that I want to share with you, and then I'll be out of your way. Thank you for your time. Voting is not enough. You also have to have an agenda and have power building. And so what this opportunity has allowed us is to consider what human flourishing looks like for our people in Texas. And one of the great issues that we are facing in Texas is the issue surrounding juvenile justice. In August of last year, the DOJ came out of a report saying that the worst atrocities that they have found anywhere in the country of young people being held in juvenile detention were happening in the state of Texas. Some young people within our statewide facilities were forced to drink urine. The sexual assaults of young people under Texas custody were higher than any other place in America. And because these are quote unquote troubled kids, you don't have a lot of people rallying around them and fighting on their behalf. Next slide, please. And so I'm a founding member of this organization is the Dallas Black Clergy for Safety, Justice, and Equity. Another of founding members is Dr. Freddie Haynes. And we decided to do a direct action protest of the detention center in Dallas, which started a chain of events that resulted in the firing and removal of the executive director, bringing in new leadership, new investigations, and an entire overhaul of that department. And because of the successes that we received in Dallas, next slide, please, took it to Bishop Brailsford to see if this is something that we can champion as an AME church in Texas. And with his blessing, the church in Texas got behind juvenile justice, particularly in this latest election cycle, in this latest legislative session. Next slide, please. Through the work of Brother Carl Davis, who was here, we were able to bring clergy from all across the state of Texas as part of an advocacy day in Austin to meet with legislators, but we went with a plan. We went with an agenda. And we're able to lay that agenda before them. But we didn't just show up for one day. Next slide, please. We continued to show up and to speak in the commission hearings. We continue to write our legislators. We continue to protest and the like. Next slide and final slide that I have to share with you before you hit this. I'm very happy to say this to you today, that before this legislative session, it was a given that 1727, which was legislation to expand incarceration for young people in the state of Texas, was going to pass without opposition. By the glory of God, through the work of God and the work of God's people, I'm happy to say that that measure has now failed. To God be the glory for the things that God has done. And there's a greater agenda that we're putting forth before you. And so I want to share this video with you. And then I'm sure if there's any time for question and answers, I'm happy to share with you. But this is a part of our work for Advocacy Day, a word from our bishop, a word from our supervisor, and a brief word for myself as we continue to engage in this work.
It is a very significant and historic day for us to be here, because when we think about all that is going on in our country, in our state, and around our world, I do not believe that the church can be silent. Coming here to the state capitol where so many decisions are made that impacts the lives of our people, I thought was a very important place to begin. I had worked before with Black Voters Matter as a partnership with the AME Church when I was president of the Council of Bishops, and now today to reestablish that, if you will, for here in the state of Texas was important. And we're looking forward to joining hands with those persons of goodwill to make a difference for all of our people. We've met with certain senators and representatives. We will then follow up with those relationships going forward in the future. But I thought it was important to be here to let people know, be on notice. The AME Church is here. We're present, we're serious, and we're about the work that needs to be done.
I'm here because I trust and believe that the ministry of presence is extremely important. I know that our being here means a lot, not simply because we are on the grounds. Somebody out there in the state is going to see this. They're going to recognize that the AME Church showed up.
The state capitol building of Texas sits upon the Confederate Memorial Lawn. The very grounds of this building sits upon property named in honor of those who held our ancestors as slaves. It's very clear that any building set upon land that honors enslavers will continue to inflict harm upon our people. And the reason we're here today is to be a stopgap to that harm, and in fact, to push it back so that all the citizens of Texas can know human flourishing. Dr. King said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I'll add that it only bends if you bend it. And we're here to bend the moral arc towards justice until such time as justice flows like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Thank you for your time.
Reverend Thomas is going to come, and then the wrap is most appropriate with Dr. John Thomas, who is the one who is the glue that holds so much of the work we do together. Not only is he there as statements are issued, he is urging us to do that. He is well connected to get the word out. He is honest and earnest with us about the authenticity and the urgency of most issues. And so we will wrap this panel with the editor of the Christian Recorder, Dr. John Thomas.
Good afternoon to each and every person that attends this. First, let me shout out and give honor to my bishop, Bishop Samuel L. Green, Senior in the 1st District. Let me put a precursor. I am a field organizer. I am boots on the ground. I count votes. I identify votes. I educate those votes, and then I mobilize those votes to show up. As I have worked for many elected officials throughout my 68 years of living, I can tell you how critical the church is, and Black church in particularly. Before anything is done, many of my candidates are, in fact, if they have become governors, senators, or congressional members, state legislators, have said, go and figure out where the church is. And so I suggest, as we historically lay out what the AME Church has done and what AME Church has been known for, that in the words of Joshua, in the words that are in Joshua 1, on 2 to 3 occasions in verses 6, 8, and 9, God continues to say to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Yes, Moses is gone, but be strong and courageous. And so I come here today and say this is a time for those of us in the AME churches to be strong and be courageous. Yes, we are tired. Yes, there are studies that says that we are choosing not to show up. It is not about triflingness. It's not about the polls won't let us there. It's not about we're intimidated. We are choosing that neither party or elected officials have represented our interests. But I come to tell you that historically, as have been stated here today, Dr. King marched the first time, nobody showed up. Second time, nobody showed up. And the third time, it was in fact the children. And so I think what we must do from the very beginning, from them disbanding books all throughout the country, for all of the activities that this president and this administration is doing, that we must take our focus on what our priorities are to us. And so I recommend that we create agendas that is self-serving for us, and then begin to identify the like-minded organizations and persons in our community that can assist us in moving our agenda. So if our agenda is about books and making sure that our educational system is better for our children, then we must go and seek those interest groups that have our interests. All too often, we just roll to whatever is popular, whether it's Reverend Barber, whether it's Al Sharpton, whoever it is. We tend to assume that their voices is greater than ours, but that is not the case as we are a connectional church. And so I recommend highly to each and every person that you identify those persons that have like-minded on your agenda. One, I assume that you come together and make an agenda, not assuming that everything that is out there in the ethos, in the community is important to you. I often tell members at Grant Chapel AME Church in Trenton, if you come to me for certain issues, I'm sending you to somewhere else, because that is not my interest. That is not where I focus at. I am community, I am civil rights, I am social justice. And so if you come to me with a concern as it relates to marriage or something else, I must identify one of my colleagues that can handle your agenda. What are you saying, Regina? I'm saying all too often we must identify the issue that is critical to us, our members, and our community. And do not go past that. Don't just be jumping on everyone's bailiwick and assuming that that's what's going to get us where we need to be. And so identify, educate, and mobilize. Identify, educate, and mobilize. Identify the issues that is relevant and important to you. Identify those persons that can assist you in moving that agenda. We just recently, on last Tuesday, had our gubernatorial election in New Jersey, and it did not matter. And for the record, I know we non-partisan and all of that. I supported Ras Baraka. I didn't listen to the folk that said he's Black, he didn't have a chance. And I kept saying, what you mean? President Obama was African American and he won. And so we must continue to mobilize past what we see are the things that are blocking us. Lo and behold, 6, 7 people in the race, very prominent people that spent way more money than our campaign had. Ras Baraka came in number 2. in the overall election, won the two major counties in the state, where all of the political pundits are from. And so the power is in not us losing, but the power is in that the coalition that put us and the agenda that put us front now puts us in the position to be very powerful and instrumental in whatever the nominee presses forward. Whichever nominee we support, we're moving forward. So again, in short time, identify, educate, and mobilize. We must be an active part. We cannot always sit back complaining about what is not happening, who ain't doing what they supposed to do, and why are they banning books. If we're worried about why they're banning books, then we must purchase books that are relevant and allow our children and our congregations to begin to read them. Nobody controls our destination but us, enforced with making sure that God has us covered. I'm going to say it again: identify, educate, and mobilize. I've run campaigns throughout the country, whether it's Russia, South Africa, or Haiti. Identify, educate, and mobilize. I learned whatever the language is. I learned those three words first. Those three words first. And so I think we must continue in the words found in Joshua: be strong and be courageous. But it does not mean that we stop the movement. Ain't nothing changed. The promises that God gave to Moses, he gave to Joshua, and therefore we too have them through Jesus. And so I assume that we must become active again. We must utilize those things that we already have in the AME church. Don't be looking about what mega churches or anyone else have. Let's sit back, and I've heard the conversation on class leaders. Let's make sure that our class leaders understand what is of interest within their purview, within their group, in their cell. And let's begin then to move that agenda forward by identifying, educating, and mobilize. I'm going to give the rest of my time back. I can be reached on rthomas@aft.org, rthomas@aft.org. You can go to AFT, American Federation of Teachers, but aft.org, and see all of the numerous things that we are fighting for. Randy Weingarten, president of our organization, is out there. We are supporting, we are defending the right for teachers to teach from books. We give away a lot of banned books. We were just in Atlanta over the weekend giving out books. We gave over 5,000 books to children so that they can in fact read about what they're doing. We're filing lawsuits against all of the crazy stuff in the defense against the Department of Education. And so I recommend that you become part of the movement or someone's movement. Yield back the rest of my time. Thank you for the opportunity.
You know, one of the fun things about going at the end is that you get to build upon what everyone else has said. And as a good teacher, you tell people, tell them what you're going to tell them to do, and then you tell them at the end. So this is going to be repetition for you all. As stated, I'm John Thomas III, editor of the Christian Recorder. And to Dr. Thomas, who just spoke, I'm also a proud member of AFT Local 6741, which is the Association of Academic University Professors. We are also fighting with AFT and the madness that we are seeing. And I want to pick up where Dr. Thomas left off, starting by being part of someone's movement. We are part of various places and wear various hats, but we sometimes don't even realize the hats that we wear. For example, Harold Love, who is the incumbent president of the National Conference of Black State Legislatures. We did a survey to figure out which AMEs are state legislatures. We've identified across the country about 20 people who are AMEs, stores, trustees, class leaders, who are serving as state legislatures, including Adrienne Jones, who is the only sitting AME who is the head of her chamber. She is the head of the House of Delegates of Maryland. And what that tells you is that you may be sitting next to a legislature. You may be sitting next to a union rep. You may be sitting next to a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. You may be sitting next to a county commissioner and not even realize it. So one of the challenges that I have that we've tried to do with the recorder is to spotlight these things that we see. And again, I'm a layperson, so I have to also say that sometimes we think leadership is going to look one way when it may look like something very else. And one of the things that I appreciate Bishop Jackson has always been big on reminding us about people like Reverend Thomas. I knew about Reverend Thomas. I know her work in New Jersey. She's not at a lead church, not a bishop, but she is one of the movers and shakers in New Jersey. And so I would encourage you, you all know your local churches. Look in your local church and the people that you go to get that proclamation for your annual church day, we need to galvanize the support because we already have it in our church. We just forget all these pieces that we have. So I wanted to start there where Reverend Thomas left us off. I've been asked to talk to you briefly about, let me pull this up. You see here, getting the word out, social media, elections, and old-fashioned outreach. So first and foremost, getting the word out. The AME Church, through the Christian Recorder, we've tried to work over these last 8 years, building upon a legacy of getting out messages. The AME Church has a database of at least 25,000 people that we can get to at a moment's notice. Now, that database sometimes gets used for interesting things, like I don't see any bishop candidates in the room. Let me just stop right there for a second. But I did see President McKeedy. He's a candidate running for a lay election. We appreciate your donations to the recorder for your ads, sir. Thank you very much. But in all seriousness, the recorder is an organ that touches tens of thousands of people. Tens of thousands of people read our news, see what we do. And so again, we sometimes don't use what we have in front of us to get the word out. I'm thankful that people like Reverend Whitlock, Reverend Waters, tell us stories to tell. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because y'all, I can look across the room and I've gotten an article at some piece. I see you, Reverend C. Wright and Jeremy over there, from someone in this room about something in their church or in their district. So what I need you to do is to tell the people that aren't here, we need to hear about what's going on in your churches, and we need to leverage the recorder and the assets that the church has already paid for to get the word out. We have media expertise. We have a network. We have these things. We just don't use them to the fullest capacity. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, about elections. I'm a political scientist, for those of you who may or may not know. I teach political science at the College of Charleston, South Carolina. Voting is wonderful. Voting is great. Voting's terrific. Everyone needs to go vote. But elections are not everything. Work to cultivate a voter does not start an election. So I want to highlight something the 7th Episcopal District is doing and starting. They are starting a program where they are getting local churches to write letters to congresspersons. And then they are getting the various presiding elder districts, instead of using that to get an assessment, they're using the presiding elder districts to send people to the meetings to go to the school board and the county commission. What that does is what you do in between the election. Everyone in this room has voted. I'm pretty much sure. How many of y'all have been to a county commission meeting? How many of y'all have been to a local school board meeting? How many of y'all, if you were to be asked who your local council person is, would even know it? Though, again, this is the choir room, but I need the choir room to go tell the rest of us outside. We compile all these statistics, but it's the in-between time. So if you want to ask me, how do I get more people to vote? Tell them, go to the meeting. Sit there. And I'm glad the 7th District has realized letters are important. But they need to know, even if they're not, even if they have an R behind their last name or whatever, that may be an R or a D, because sometimes the Ds don't do much for us either. Whatever the listener behind their last name, we're here. And we're going to be here because you serve us. You serve us. The last thing that I want to bring up, because I was given 3 points like a good AME preacher, even though I'm not one, is old-fashioned outreach. That again brings up telling people, we have a wonderful system to get things done. Everyone here, if I was to tell you the conference system, we know the general to the annual conference, to the quarterly conference, to the district conference, to the local church conference. We've used that system to do lots of good work, to uplift the church, but somewhere along the way, we flipped it to be something that's extractive and not something that can be progressive to get things forward. I am upset and frustrated when I hear that annual conferences don't have social action commissions, or that Episcopal districts don't have a voting coordinator, or that a presiding elders district does not have a list of public officials. If the system is good enough to get our money and tithes and train our preachers, it's good enough for us to use to help educate and get outreach. So I ain't asking y'all to do anything else than what we already have. And as Bishop Jackson is fond of saying, we have it in our hands already. So I see an elder right here. And I know this elder actually does do social action in his district. I see 2 elders. So for those of y'all whose elders may not have that spirit or guidance, ask them, volunteer. I promise you, there's not a single elder or single bishop who would say no, because it is too important for us to not be impactful in this moment. If you ask, well, you know, marching and numbers, where do we start? You start small. Again, like Dr. Thomas said, it took King 3 times to get a march together. And I'm going to leave y'all with one book. My beloved colleague, Dr. Henderson, always likes to drop a book, so I'm taking this from him as well. But there's a book that just came out. It's $16, and I would encourage all of you to read it. It's 2 words, The Project. The Project by David A. Graham. The Project. Now, for those of y'all who don't want to read the 900 pages of 2025, this book will give you a journalist's analysis of Project 2025 and how it has already been implemented. So this is a book that I'm assigning to my students in the fall. It's a 200-page read from Penguin Random House. So this is a journalist. This is not, punditry. It is The Project by David A. Graham. He's a journalist who worked for the Times, for the Post. It is a quick read. It's an eye-opening read, and it's divided into chapters. So you can understand where things are happening and changing, because you can't tell people Project 2025 is destroying us. That clearly didn't work for us in 2024. You have to show the people what is happening before their eyes. Every Christian, it is our duty to know and understand what we can do when we see wrong so we can right it. So I encourage you to read the book to understand what's going on in this country right now. And I kind of did say one more thing I need to say. We talk a lot about the U.S., the U.S., the U.S. In May, I had the honor of going to the United Nations to be at the Permanent Forum for Purposes on African Descent. There is a global movement of Black people that we are a part of because of our very skin and our DNA. And when we think these are U.S. problems, discussions of reparations, discussions of justice, discussions of human rights are everywhere. And we have to remind our bench, remind our bishops, remind ourselves that some of the solutions to our problems and some of the people we need to work with are not in these United States. So I just want to say, always remember that. Thank you all. I see my time's up. I'll talk to y'all later. Love y'all. You're up.
You can see why I call him the glue that brings us all together. Bishop Jackson wants us to kick off the Q&A period. We have 2 burning issues from amongst us, and that's what we wanted to have happen. First, we have Judge Tabila, who is reminding us that there's something else very important about this day, June 16th, and she'll share with us what that is. And then Sister Letitia Williams-Watford, who came to say, there's something I got to say before we leave here. And so I'm giving it to both of them and then to Bishop Jackson. But let me just say one of the things that John Thomas brought to mind. How many of us at the annual conference listened to the report called the Pastor's Report, the Church Report? and it asks a key question: how many registered voters do you have? The answer is sometimes 100%. What does that mean? The answer is sometimes all the adults. What does that mean? The question was put there because it's important for us to know who is registered to vote, and if they're not registered to vote, to try to find out why and to get them registered, to the point that Reverend Waters is raising. We can find among ourselves those who are not voting, who are choosing not to vote. So at your next annual conference, try to see if you can get your bishop and your presiding elder to come in with a real number, because that's the work we can do in our local churches, so that we can come in and say 283, and we know exactly who is registered to vote. Come on, guys.
Greetings, beloved. Allow me to observe the already observed protocol, but allow me to deviate slightly and acknowledge my bishop, who has been a father to me ever since I joined the Connectional Church and who supports me through it all. The Connectional leaders, my brothers and sisters, and I would be kicked out of home if I do not acknowledge my president, Ntate Makiti. I would not be permitted to enter the borders of South Africa. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank you, Mejeki, for hearing me when I walked up to you and reminded you that today is a rather significant day in my country. I will attempt to do it in less than 3 minutes and not amputate anything that is significant. Today marks 16th June, the Soweto Uprising. Those of you that are old enough to remember what happened then, and those of you that have opened history books would know that on this day, a group of students from South Africa, Soweto, decided to unite, have the audacity to call truth to power, and tell what thought was power then, that you can no longer oppress us. At that time, it appeared as though the fight was about the language Afrikaans, which is the language of the oppressor. But a close inspection and interrogation of what actually transpired on that day will reveal that that was the day that as Black people, we were reminded of the power to unite, the power to focus on one intentional purpose, the power to unite against the odds, putting your life in danger to stand and fight for equality and justice, not for own benefit, but for the benefit of generations to come. Today, I stand here as a judge of the Connectional AME Church because I stand on the shoulders and on the blood flow that flowed, that filled the streets, not only in Soweto, but in many townships in South Africa that day. It was the young people that reminded the old people that it takes a village to bring up a child. But they did more than that. They evinced what we as Black people seem to forget and need reminding, that united we stand and divided we fall. They reminded us that as a Black nation, no race is more intelligent, more resilient, more powerful, more determined. No other race has the audacity, in spite the odds, in spite everything systematically working against us, to rise and rise. And when we fall forward 7 times, and those that come behind us stand to show that we are truly God's chosen people. So when I walked in here, I remembered the conversation that I was having with myself. What transpired is I missed 3 flights coming here. So I had been on the road for 2.5 days. I got here this morning, only to be told that my accommodation was canceled. So it's been a long journey. But as I sat in multiple airports, I asked my question, what does June 16 mean to me? Because it can no longer be it cannot be a common goal if it does not start with a person, it does not start within. June 16 to me says we have to be responsible with the gift and the opportunity and the privilege that we now have to ensure that whatever legacy we live is good enough, worthy, and deserving for our shoulders to one day be stood upon by those who will judge us in the future and say, I am proud to be a descendant of these people. That is what June 16 means to me. I promise to be brief without amputation. And with those words, I will yield for my president, President Makiti, who has so kindly stood next to me because I had not prepared anything to say to you this afternoon. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. My last words to you is, we are the testimony of what Black people throughout the globe can be if we stand together. If there's ever doubt that Black people are excellence, look at the AME Church. If there's ever any doubt that anything is impossible, tell them there's a girl from the dusty villages of Kwakwa who now is a judge in the Connectional AME Church. And that is the blood, the character, the strength of the AME Church. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody, Bishop and everybody else. It is a great pleasure to stand up here and echo the sentiments that were spoken about by the judge. It just takes courage. In spite of all the challenges that you have, you must just have courage to do that. And we can see that coming up. And let us seize the moment and make sure that the things are changed. We only need to be courageous. Speaking after her, that is why she's the judge of the AME Church and I'm not.
To Bishop Jackson and Sister Jackie DuPont Walker, and to all of you assembled today, I'm Letitia Williams-Watford, presiding elder of the Phoenix City District of the 9th Episcopal District. In my hand, I have a statement that was penned by Bishop Francine Brookins in support of a very important mission that is being undertaken by Faith in Action, Alabama. She wrote this in her capacity as the president or the chairperson of the Pan Methodist Commission. She wrote these words and forwarded these words to the bishops serving on that commission across 5 Methodist denominations. Hear what she wrote. Beloved, raw sewage is flooding homes and yards in Lowndes County, Alabama, creating a public health emergency that cannot be ignored. For years, across 3 generations, I might add, frontline residents, led by advocates such as Catherine Coleman Flowers, have sounded the alarm about this preventable crisis. Yet, despite the urgent need, the federal funding for vital mitigation has been withdrawn, leaving families exposed to dangerous pathogens and environmental hazards. This is not just a local issue. It is a test of our collective resolve to stand with communities forced to bear the brunt of systemic neglect. Every day that action is delayed, children and elders are put at risk, and the cycle of harm continues. Now is the time to intervene. We must rally together, neighbors, advocates, health professionals, and public officials to demand an immediate solution and restore dignity and safety to Lowndes County. She is asking those members of the Pan Methodist Commission, which include us, to use our voice, our networks, and our resources to amplify the stories of those affected and keep public attention on this crisis. She is asking us to urge local, state, and federal leaders to reinstate and expand funding for sewage infrastructure. Please let us support grassroots organizations working on the ground to provide relief and long-term solution. And then let us insist on accountability and transparency in all efforts to remediate this public health hazard. Let us not stand by and watch a community's basic right to health be denied. Join this movement to eliminate the injustice and to ensure that every family in Lowndes County and across the nation can live free from the threat of raw sewage and environmental harm. And to this, I would add, a mass rally is presently being organized by Faith in Action Alabama to be held in late July 2025 to protest the withdrawal of funds that took so many years to acquire, to protest the withdrawal of funds to right this heinous wrong by the stroke of a pen of 47. As he claims, federal efforts to eradicate this ongoing travesty is nothing but a DEI initiative unworthy of such funding. This, beloved, is call to action, and I implore you, do what you can where you are to raise this clarion call. And at the Lord's leading, truly consider joining our mass rally. Our rally is just a beginning because we cannot put this cause down until this travesty is attended to and resolved. And one more personal note. I had working for me a yard man who says, we need to fertilize your garden. He says, don't worry about going to Lowe's. I'm going to bring you fertilizer. And he brought me fertilizer from the ground in Lowndes County. And not a thing in that garden has ever grown. The Lord bless and keep you. And may you join us as we fight this travesty. Thank you.
All right, now that's a tough one to follow. Are there any questions? Any questions from anybody? Any questions? Yes, sir, Dr. Whitlock.
Bishop, it just seems to me that when I look at television, it just seems that I'm reminded of how Playmaster Street, runaway slave, separating mothers from children, dividing, not by law but by faith. Bishop, how may we, African Methodist Episcopal Church, help my Mexican, Latino, Hispanic brothers and sisters coexist in this country?
Thank you. Very good question. The first thing is somebody has to speak up for them besides them. And I say that because much of this country has bought into the rhetoric that all the immigrants from across the southern border are criminals, even to the point that those nations like Mexico and other nations are sending them here, which all of that is absolutely untrue. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about in the Commission on Social Action tomorrow is a response to help with that. Okay, because they don't have a microphone. The president has the biggest microphone in the world. Black church does have a microphone. And some others, I've spoken to some of the United Methodist bishops, and we all agree that somebody needs to speak up for them. So we're going to discuss that in our commission meeting tomorrow. I'm just wondering how long it's going to be before the orange man starts to, because he really doesn't know any better. He's going to begin, I presume, to say that the black church is part of the DEI movement. So, yes, sir.
So I am wondering, being that that was successful in our praise and protest, would it be advantageous for us to tackle the next economic protest? Because oftentimes we've seen they only listen to the impact that their pockets. And so if we can keep that same momentum and go to the next, economic protest to tackle, also while we strategize and work on building community among us as a Black community.
There's discussion within the Conference of National Black Churches, which represents all of the major Black denominations in the country, to plan something for either September or October. We did not look toward the summer because the summer would be extremely difficult between kids out of school, folk on vacation, and everything else. But beginning in the fall, and so we're in the process now trying to put something together major, in fact, for the entire nation. And I'll be talking about that, and if it's I'm one of them recommending that. So if once we get that approved by the different denominations, then hopefully we can move on that. Again, one of the things which is difficult, every denomination has to approve what they do. And so that's what we're in the process of trying to get done this summer. For example, I'm going to discuss that with the bishop this afternoon, so I can't get him mad with me today. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Yes. Well, first of all, that's going to end up being a legal matter. It's like it's already a legal matter. Is one of the things on the plate that the Supreme Court has to decide. I mean, the Supreme Court has a whole bunch of stuff. And to be frank with you, again, as was said before, this administration is pushing a whole lot of stuff, hoping that it goes to the Supreme Court. And because he's appointed 3 of the justices, and because a majority of them are apparently of that ideology, he expects it passed. And and you have to read through what he's saying. He's saying stuff now to try to intimidate the Supreme Court. When you hear rumors out that President Trump has expressed disappointment that some of the justices he's appointed to the Supreme Court are voting against him. That's his way of trying to intimidate the Supreme Court. So it's going to be an interesting ride. It's interesting that all of the lower courts largely seem to be voting against him, but then you see what happens when it gets to the Supreme Court. For example, the biggest one coming up now is birthright. The Supreme Court rules that even if you're born in this country, you know that would be catastrophic. All right, all right. We want to close with this prayer. All right, now, brothers and sisters, we're going to again. Let me thank you, Jackie, and I want to thank each of you for coming. And we want to close with I thought was an absolutely awesome prayer written by one of the retired United Methodist Church bishops. That's the prayer we're going to close with, and I think some of you may have a copy, but I'm going to pray it this afternoon as we adjourn this meeting. And now may the Lord torment you. May the Lord keep before you the faces of the rejected and the despised. May the Lord afflict you with pain for the oppressed, the abused, the hurting, the victims of violence. May God grace you with agony, a burning thirst for righteousness. May the Lord give you courage and strength and make ours a better world, to make your community and your church a better church. And may you do your very best to make it so, and have done your best. May the Lord grant you peace. Amen. Thank you so very much. Thank all the folk from the 2nd District who came. I see you.
So watch, we're standing tall, shouting loud, no time to crawl. Look who roots, our guiding star. In action we rise, no matter how far. It's our time, it's our voice, in the movement we rejoice. For our people, for our kin, they and me will always win. Richard, Sarah, Garnet too, Cecilia and Anne, their faith so true. Ripples, justice done, we'll carry the torch until we're one. For faithful Quinn, for those who came, who shaped the course, who changed the game. Every hymn, every prayer rings clear. African Methodist, I love sincere. For Zedekiah, Helene and Frank,